I never thought I'd see my name on a lawsuit. Not like this. One Tuesday morning, while I was sipping coffee on the porch, a manila envelope slapped down in front of me like a thunderclap. Certified mail. Stamped. Official. My gut twisted before I even tore it open. Inside, a stack of legal papers thicker than the town phone book. Bold black letters across the top read, "Violation of HOA rules." I laughed. At first, because it had to be a mistake. See, my wife Amy and I don't belong to any HOA. Never have. That's exactly why we bought our little cabin on the edge of the county. To get away from all the silly rules, the "you can't park here" signs, the arguments over mailbox paint. Freedom. That's what we wanted. That's what we built. But the papers didn't care about freedom. They shouted accusations, fines, threats. And right there, in black and white, my name was dragged into court by a woman I barely knew, Karen, the self-appointed queen of the High Pines Homeowners Association. According to her, I'd broken a laundry list of HOA rules. My fence wasn't regulation height, my fire pit was unsafe, my landscaping wasn't aesthetically consistent with community standards. She even claimed I owed years of unpaid HOA dues. I sat there at my kitchen table flipping through page after page, my hands shaking with equal parts anger and disbelief. My wife read over my shoulder, calm as ever, though I could feel the heat rising in her chest. "How can she sue us?" I asked. "We don't even live in her HOA." Amy's jaw tightened. "That's exactly what makes it dangerous," she whispered. "She's either out of her mind or she's planning something bigger." I wanted to storm down the road, bang on Karen's door, and tell her exactly where she could shove her lawsuit. But Amy stopped me cold. She's always been the level head. "Don't give her the satisfaction," she said. "We'll fight this where it counts, in court." Still, rage simmered in my blood. It wasn't just a neighborly squabble anymore. This was war, dressed up in legal paperwork. And here's the cruelest part. Lawsuits don't care about the truth at first. They drain your time, your money, your peace of mind. Whether you're right or wrong, you're already dragged into the mud. That's the game Karen wanted to play. I stared down at those papers, my coffee long gone cold. My quiet mornings, my hard-earned freedom, they were all under attack by someone who believed rules gave her power over lives she didn't own. But if Karen thought she could bulldoze me with threats and fake authority, she didn't know who she was dealing with, because the one thing worse than being dragged into a fight you didn't start is being underestimated once you're in it. And to understand how I ended up in that courtroom months later, staring across at Karen and her smirk, you need to know where it all began, on a morning just like this one, when Karen first set foot on my porch. Before all this madness began, my life was quiet, almost too quiet. That's exactly how I liked it. When Amy and I first found the cabin, it wasn't much to look at. A weathered little place tucked among tall pines, with peeling paint and a roof that had seen better decades. Most folks would have driven past it without a second glance. But when we stepped out of the truck that day, breathing in the crisp mountain air, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. No barking HOA dogs telling me where to park, no approved paint swatches nailed to a bulletin board, no busybodies measuring the height of my grass, just silence, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you remember what freedom tastes like. Amy stood on the porch with her hands on her hips, squinting at the sagging boards. "She's rough," she said, "but I think she's got good bones." She was talking about the house, but I knew she meant us too. After decades of city life, office stress, and neighbors who thought they ran the block, we were ready for a reset. So, we rolled up our sleeves, we painted, we patched, we hammered and hauled. Every evening ended the same. 2 rocking chairs on the porch, a sunset bleeding gold through the tree line, mugs of coffee between us, and the feeling that, at last, we'd carved out our own little corner of peace. The locals left us alone, which was just fine. We weren't antisocial, we waved, we helped shovel snow, we bought pies at the county fair. But nobody poked their nose in our business. That's how it should be. Life fell into a rhythm. I split firewood in the mornings, Amy tended her vegetable garden in the afternoons, and the nights belonged to crickets and the crackle of our fireplace. When you live like that, you start to believe trouble can't find you, that it's reserved for other people in other places. I should have known better. Looking back now, I can still picture one of those perfect mornings. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window as Amy slid a skillet of bacon onto the table. The smell alone could make a man believe heaven had a kitchen. She teased me for reading the old county newspaper like it mattered, and I teased her for planting more tomatoes than we could ever eat. It was ordinary, beautifully ordinary. That's why it blindsided me when Karen showed up. At the time, I didn't even know her name. Just a flash of sharp blonde hair, oversized sunglasses, and a clipboard clutched against her chest like a weapon. She didn't wave, didn't smile. She just stood there at the edge of my property, scribbling something onto her papers, lips pursed like she'd tasted something sour. Amy nudged me. "You know her?" I shook my head. The woman spotted us, gave a stiff nod, then vanished back down the road. I thought nothing of it, just a curious stranger passing by. If only I'd known that clipboard was the first crack in my peaceful dream. If only I'd realized she wasn't passing through, she was plotting. But back then, I brushed it off, took another bite of bacon, smiled at Amy. The storm was already gathering, but I was too busy enjoying the sunshine to see it. The first real time I met Karen, she didn't knock. She didn't wave or call out, or wait politely at the edge of the driveway like a normal neighbor might. She marched straight up my porch steps like she owned the place, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on, that little pinched expression that told you she'd already decided you were guilty of something. I was halfway through repairing the porch railing when I heard the sharp click of her heels on the boards. Amy was inside, humming over a batch of bread dough, the smell drifting out the kitchen window. It was one of those mornings that should have been perfect, until Karen arrived. "Excuse me," she snapped, not waiting for me to turn around. "You can't have that railing like that. It's a violation." I paused mid-hammer. "Excuse me?" She thrust her clipboard under my nose, pointing at some printed sheet filled with bullet points. "High Pines HOA Regulations, Section 5, Subsection C. All porch railings must be uniform in height, painted white, and maintained at all times." I blinked at her, slowly set down my hammer. "Lady, I think you've got the wrong house." Her lips tightened. "This is the right house. I've been monitoring the neighborhood. You're clearly within High Pines jurisdiction." That word, jurisdiction, set my teeth on edge, like she was a sheriff serving papers, not a stranger with a clipboard. I leaned against the railing I'd been fixing and folded my arms. "I'm not in your HOA." She gave me a look that could curdle milk. "Everyone around here is in the HOA." Not me. For a moment, silence stretched between us. A bird chirped from the pines. My dog barked in the distance. Karen's jaw twitched, but she recovered quickly, scribbling something on her paper. "Non-compliance will result in fines. I'll be reporting this to the board." I couldn't help but laugh. "Go ahead. Report away. You don't run my house." That laugh must have been gasoline on her fire. She stiffened, snapped her clipboard shut, and marched back down the steps like she'd just lost a battle she wasn't ready to concede. Amy came out onto the porch, wiping her hands on a flowery apron. "Who was that?" "Some HOA busybody," I muttered. "Says our railing violates her rules." Amy raised an eyebrow. "Her rules?" I nodded, still half amused. "Yeah, according to her, we're under her jurisdiction. Can you believe that?" Amy studied me for a moment, then glanced down the road where Karen's figure was retreating, heels stabbing the dirt like she hated the ground she walked on. "I don't like the look in her eye," Amy said softly. "She's not going to let this go." I shrugged it off at the time. To me, Karen was just another one of those people who needed control to feel important. I figured ignoring her would starve her of power. I was wrong, because a week later, I found another envelope taped to my front door. Not a lawsuit yet, just a typed notice from the High Pines HOA board, citing me for continued non-compliance and warning of fines to be assessed. I almost tore it up right then and there, but Amy stopped me. She read every word carefully, lips pursed. "She's trying to build a case," she said. "This isn't random." That night, sitting on the porch as the sun dipped low, I couldn't shake the image of Karen's sunglasses glaring at me like two black mirrors, that clipboard, that smug confidence. It was like she'd declared war, and I hadn't even realized it yet. At the time, I thought it was just about a railing, just one stubborn neighbor with too much time on her hands. But Karen wasn't just stubborn. She was relentless. And what started as a single confrontation on my porch would soon spiral into something much bigger, something that would drag me into courtrooms, paperwork, and fights I never asked for. That was the day Karen really entered my life. And from that moment on, peace was no longer an option. It started small. A letter taped to my door here, a note tucked under my windshield wiper there, always typed, always official looking, always signed, the High Pines HOA board. But let's be clear, I wasn't part of the High Pines HOA. I didn't pay dues, I didn't sign papers. Our little patch of land sat outside their borders. My cabin wasn't even on their map. That didn't stop Karen. The second letter accused me of having non-standard paint colors. I stared at the page, then at my cabin. Brown walls, white trim, the same colors it had been since the day we moved in. The same colors most mountain cabins wore like badges of honor. Amy shook her head. She's inventing violations. She knows she can't control us, so she's trying to wear us down. I crumpled the letter, tossed it in the trash. But the next week, there was another. Unapproved garden beds. Now, Amy's garden was her pride and joy. Tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, beans, all growing in neat raised beds she built herself. She tended them every morning like they were her children. According to Karen, those beds violated aesthetic regulations. Amy laughed at first, but later that night, I caught her staring out the kitchen window at her plants with a shadow in her eyes. The third notice accused us of improper vehicle storage. My old pickup was parked in the driveway, not on blocks, not abandoned, just parked. Apparently, that was a crime. Every week, another notice appeared, each one more ridiculous than the last. Excessive noise from tools, yard debris not cleared, unapproved porch furniture. I swear she even cited me for improper use of a grill. Each paper felt like a mosquito bite, small but relentless. Alone they were laughable. Together they started to itch under my skin. I'd sit on the porch at night, flipping through the stack of notices. My jaw clenched. How many trees has she killed printing this nonsense? I muttered once, tossing the pile onto the table. Amy tried to calm me. She's fishing. She wants a reaction. Well, she was getting one. Because with each notice, the tone sharpened, the fines grew larger, the threats grew bolder. One letter even claimed we could face lien proceedings if the violations weren't corrected. That one hit a nerve. A lien meant our property could be at risk. Our home. The place we'd poured sweat and years into. Amy saw the color drain from my face when I read it. She put her hand on mine. She can't do that. We're not in her HOA. I nodded, but the words echoed anyway. Lien proceedings. It didn't matter that she had no authority. She was acting like she did. And the scarier part? She believed she did. That's when I realized this wasn't about paint colors or porch furniture. It was about control. Karen wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was a self-appointed sheriff of a world she thought she ruled, and she had chosen us as her example. One afternoon, after the fifth or sixth notice, I found her standing on the edge of my yard again, clipboard in hand, sunglasses reflecting the sunlight. "Afternoon," I called, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't answer, just scribbled something down, turned on her heel, and walked away. That silence was worse than any lecture. Amy came out, frowning. "She's building a case file on us," she whispered. I wanted to laugh it off, but deep down, I knew Amy was right. Karen wasn't going to stop, not until she broke us or forced us out. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and listened to the crickets outside. My home was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place free from politics and pettiness. But thanks to Karen, every sunrise felt like a countdown to whatever she planned next. And judging by the venom in those notices, I knew it was only a matter of time before she aimed for something bigger, something that could drag us into a fight we never asked for. It came on a Tuesday, a plain white envelope left on my porch like all the others. But this one was different, heavier, stiffer, sealed by the county clerk's office. Not another HOA notice, a summons. I stood there in the morning light, envelope in hand, the world tilting around me. My coffee went cold as I tore it open. Inside, 48 pages of legal documents, filed by the High Pines Homeowners Association. Defendant, Me. Allegations, repeated violations of community standards, non-payment of assessed fines, failure to comply with directives issued by the HOA board. Amy came to the door just as my knees gave out onto the porch step. What is it? I handed her the papers, couldn't even speak. Her eyes scanned the first page, then widened. Oh my God, she actually did it. Karen, she'd sued me. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march straight to her house and drop those papers on her doorstep. But all I could do was sit there, staring at the lines of legal jargon that twisted lies into accusations. Amy sat beside me. Her hand slipped into mine. "We'll fight it," she whispered, but I could see the worry in her eyes. Court wasn't a backyard argument. This was money, time, stress, and exactly what Karen wanted. The first hearing was set 3 weeks out. In those weeks, I noticed Karen more than ever, standing at the corner of my property, staring from her car as she drove by slow, smirking when our eyes met. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was savoring it. One night, I caught her talking with 2 other HOA board members in front of my mailbox, their voices low, their faces serious. Like generals plotting a siege. Amy pulled me inside before I could confront them. "That's what she wants," she warned. "She wants you to snap. Don't give her the satisfaction." So I bit my tongue, but inside the fire burned hotter. When the court date arrived, we dressed in our best clothes. Amy pressed her hand against my chest before we walked in. "Whatever happens, don't let her see you sweat." Easier said than done. Karen was already there, sitting front row, clipboard balanced on her lap, though this time it was stuffed with binders and folders. She wore that same smug smile, like she was about to win a prize. Her lawyer sat beside her, slick suit, polished shoes, paid for with HOA dues, no doubt. Me? I had a court-appointed attorney who looked fresh out of law school. A good kid, but nervous. He whispered, "This case is bizarre. They don't have jurisdiction. I'll make that clear to the judge." I nodded, but my stomach churned. Because no matter how ridiculous this was, I was the one standing trial, and Karen knew it. The hearing was short. The judge flipped through the paperwork, frowned, and finally said, "Counsel, I don't see any evidence this defendant is a member of your HOA." Karen's lawyer tried to dance around it. "Your Honor, the property lies within visual boundaries." "Visual boundaries?" the judge interrupted. Karen stood up, pointing at me like she'd caught me stealing. "He lives in our neighborhood. He uses our roads, our amenities. He benefits from our association without paying dues." Her voice cracked through the courtroom like a whip. I wanted to shout back, wanted to tell her she was out of her mind, but my lawyer squeezed my arm, whispering, "Let her dig her hole." The judge sighed. "Mrs. Collins, unless you can provide legal documentation showing his property is included in your HOA's charter, this case may not proceed." Karen's lips tightened. She shuffled papers, fumbled. Her lawyer cleared his throat. "We'll provide further evidence at trial, Your Honor." The judge set a trial date 6 weeks out. 6 more weeks of this nightmare. As we walked out, Karen caught my eye. She smiled, slow, cold, and in that smile I understood something terrifying. She didn't care about winning. She cared about the fight, dragging me through the mud, making me spend money, lose sleep, doubt myself. That was her victory. Amy squeezed my hand as we stepped into the sunlight. "She's not done," she said. And she was right. Because the lawsuit was only the beginning. Karen had declared war. And now we were trapped in it. The weeks that followed bled together. Papers, deadlines, hearings. Every time I thought it couldn't get worse, Karen found a way. She showed up at the county office with binders thick as phone books. Copies of every notice she'd ever left on my door. Photos of my truck, Amy's garden, even our porch chairs. Her lawyer called it a pattern of non-compliance. I called it what it was, harassment. But in court, words matter, and Karen knew how to twist hers like knives. The trial began on a gray Monday morning. Amy and I sat at the defendant's table, our young lawyer whispering strategy. Across the aisle, Karen sat tall, hair sprayed into a helmet, that ever-present clipboard on her lap. Behind her sat a row of HOA board members, and a few neighbors, people I'd waved to for years, people who used to smile. Now they avoided my eyes. Karen had poisoned the well, Day one, her lawyer painted me as the villain. A freeloader, a rule breaker, a man who thought he was above the community. I nearly laughed out loud. Above the community? All I wanted was to be left alone. Amy squeezed my knee under the table. Stay calm. Day two, Karen herself took the stand. She spoke with the conviction of a preacher. Every violation became a moral crime. Every tomato plant a rebellion. Every porch chair an affront to civilization. She even measured our garden beds, Amy whispered, shaking her head. Karen clutched her clipboard, waved photographs like holy scripture. This man, she declared, pointing at me, has shown repeated disrespect for the rules that keep our neighborhood beautiful. If we let him ignore them, what example does that set? Her voice rang through the courtroom, a performance. And the scariest part? Some people nodded along. By week 3, the legal bills piled up on my desk. Retainer fees, filing costs, hours billed for research. Every dollar felt like blood money. On one night, I slammed the folder shut and muttered, "She doesn't need to win. She's already bleeding us dry." Amy touched my shoulder, her voice soft. "Then we fight smarter, not harder." She was right, but smart didn't stop the bills from coming. Neighbors began to whisper. At the grocery store, Mrs. Jenkins from down the road avoided my cart. At church, 2 men I'd known for years suddenly found other pews. Karen's reach was spreading. She cornered people on morning walks. She sent updates through the HOA newsletter. She told anyone who would listen that I was dragging the whole neighborhood down. And worse, some believed her. Our quiet life was no longer quiet. It was a battlefield. Midway through the trial, Karen pulled her boldest stunt yet. Her lawyer submitted a motion claiming my land did, in fact, fall under the HOA charter. I nearly choked. It was a lie, a flat-out fabrication. But they presented maps, fuzzy, enlarged, highlighted to suit their story. They argued that the original intention of the HOA was to include all surrounding lots, even those never formally annexed. The judge frowned, shuffled papers, and said he'd consider the evidence. That phrase haunted me, because if he bought even one piece of Karen's fiction, we could lose everything. Amy stayed strong in public. She smiled, held my hand, told reporters outside the courthouse, "This is about standing up to bullies." But at night, when the house went dark, I heard her crying into her pillow. That broke me more than any notice, any summons, any fine. Karen wasn't just suing me. She was stealing our peace, our sleep, our sense of home. By month 2, the courtroom became routine. Wake up, dress formal, drive in silence, sit through lies, nod while lawyers argued. It wore on me. There were mornings I wanted to give up, to write a check, to sign whatever paper Karen shoved in front of me, just to make it end. But every time that thought crept in, I pictured Amy's garden, her tomatoes, the way her face lit up holding a basket of fresh cucumbers, and I knew this wasn't just about money or property lines. This was about dignity, about not letting one bitter woman rewrite the rules of my life. The trial dragged on. The bills mounted higher. Karen's smirk never faded. But somewhere, deep in the grind, a shift began. Our lawyer, nervous at first, grew sharper, more confident. He tore holes in Karen's maps, exposed contradictions in her testimony, made her lawyer stumble, and little by little, I saw the judge's patience wear thin. Still, the damage was done. My reputation, my friendships, my savings. Karen had already taken so much, and she wasn't finished. Because as the trial reached its peak, she made one final move. One that would take the fight from the courtroom, straight into our home. It happened on a Wednesday, a day that started like all the others. Another hearing, another stack of papers, another chance for Karen to sneer at me across the courtroom. I was tired. Amy was tired. Even our lawyer looked worn thin. But that morning, everything shifted. The county clerk entered carrying a box, not a folder, a box. Inside, decades of HOA records, charters, deeds, amendments. Our lawyer perked up, his eyes flashing for the first time in weeks. "This could be it," he whispered. The judge called the recess to allow both parties time to review the documents. Karen didn't look worried. She leaned back, smug as ever, arms folded. But when the clerk pulled out the original HOA charter, I saw her smirk falter. The document was old, yellowed but clear. It listed the exact lots under HOA jurisdiction, each numbered, each with boundaries described in painstaking legal detail, and mine, nowhere on the list, not even close. I felt my pulse pound. Amy grabbed my hand so tight her knuckles went white. Our lawyer stood, voice steady now, strong. Your Honor, this is definitive. The defendant's property is not, and has never been, part of the High Pines HOA. There is no legal basis for this lawsuit. The judge adjusted his glasses, scanning the pages. Indeed, I see no mention of Lot 47B. That's the defendant's parcel? Yes, Your Honor. Karen's lawyer jumped up. Objection. The intention was clearly to include. The judge cut him off. The intention is irrelevant. The document governs. And the document is clear. For the first time in months, I let myself breathe. Karen shot up from her seat, face red. He lives here. He uses our roads, our amenities. He parks his truck where children play. Mrs. Collins, the judge's voice cracked like thunder. Sit down. The room fell silent. Karen froze, trembling, then lowered herself slowly back into her seat. Her eyes burned into me, filled with something darker than anger. Rage. But beneath that rage, I saw something else. Fear. The next sessions flipped on their head. Instead of me defending myself, our lawyer pressed her. Why had she filed notices to a property never under her authority? Why had she signed letters claiming jurisdiction she didn't have? Why had she billed fines that weren't legally collectible? Every question chipped away at her facade. The judge's frown deepened with each answer. Karen's lawyer objected, dodged, stalled, but the damage was done. The record spoke louder than her clipboard ever could. Word spread fast. Neighbors who once avoided me now nodded cautiously at the grocery store. A few even whispered apologies. The tide was turning, but Amy stayed cautious. Don't celebrate yet, she said. Karen's not the type to go quietly. She was right, because Karen still had one last weapon. A week later, just when I thought we'd won, she launched it. She filed a counterclaim, defamation, against me. She argued that by telling neighbors the lawsuit was baseless, I damaged her reputation, that I had undermined her authority as HOA president. It was absurd, ridiculous, but it kept the case alive. Amy slammed the papers on the kitchen table, tears in her eyes. When does it end? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was this. The law was finally on my side. The truth was out. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Karen was on the defensive. But she wasn't finished. Not yet. Because when cornered, people like her don't surrender. They strike harder. And her next strike would come straight for my family. When I first read her counterclaim, I thought it was some kind of prank. The words were ridiculous, almost laughable. Defamation? Me? All I'd done was tell the truth. The county records didn't lie, and everyone could see she had no authority over my property. But Karen wasn't laughing. She was dead serious. And if there was one thing I'd learned by now, it was that she didn't need the truth on her side to cause pain. All she needed was paperwork, persistence, and her poisonous charm. Amy sat across from me at the kitchen table that night, staring at the bold black letters as though they were written in blood. She's not going to stop, she whispered. She'll keep twisting and twisting until we break. Her hands trembled as she shoved the papers aside. What if she drags this out for years? Something in me hardened right then, for months. I'd been reacting, flinching, defending. But as I looked at Amy, her eyes tired, her spirit stretched thin, I felt the shift. Enough was enough. If Karen wanted a war, she was going to get one. Only this time, I wouldn't be hiding behind a shield. I'd be swinging the sword. The very next morning, I called our lawyer. He sounded groggy, probably expecting another round of bad news. But when I told him my idea, he went silent for a long moment. You want to countersue? He asked finally. Exactly, I said. Harassment, malicious prosecution, emotional distress, whatever sticks. You've seen how she stalks us, how she uses her position to intimidate. This isn't about rules anymore. It's about power. She's abusing it, and she's gonna pay for it. For the first time in weeks, his voice carried something almost like excitement. We can file. And frankly, after that stunt with the charter records, I'd say the judge is already losing patience with her. This might actually work. By Friday, the papers were in. And just like that, the game changed. No longer me versus the HOA. It was me versus Karen Collins personally. But I knew one thing. Paper alone wouldn't win this fight. Karen thrived on appearances. She wore that HOA title like a crown, convincing everyone she was the queen of High Pines. She needed her neighbors' loyalty as much as she needed her clipboard, so I went after that too. It wasn't easy for me. I'm not the type to knock on doors, to make small talk with people who had spent months giving me cold stares at the mailbox. But Amy insisted. If they see the truth with their own eyes, they'll understand, she said. And she was right. So, that Saturday we printed up flyers, nothing fancy. Just plain white paper, black ink, bold letters at the top. Facts about the HOA lawsuit. Underneath, we laid it out. My property wasn't in the HOA. Karen had no authority. She'd used HOA funds to pursue her vendetta. At the bottom, we attached a copy of the county record. No opinions, no rants, just the truth. The first few doors were rough. People looked suspicious, almost annoyed. But when I handed them the flyer, when they scanned those official county lines and saw my lot number missing, I could see their expressions soften. One man muttered, "She told us you were lying." Another woman shook her head, sighing, "Lord." I knew something didn't smell right. By the time we hit the 10th house, word was spreading faster than we could keep up. Folks were meeting us at their driveways, waving us down to grab a copy. A few even asked for extras to hand out themselves. That's when I knew we'd struck a nerve. Karen's power had always been rooted in silence, neighbors too afraid or too uninformed to push back. But now, the silence was cracking, and when silence cracks, walls fall. 2 days later, I took it a step further. I called the local paper. At first, the reporter sounded half asleep, probably expecting just another petty HOA squabble. But when I mentioned misuse of community funds and a lawsuit filed without jurisdiction, his tone sharpened. "Send me everything you've got," he said. I did. Every notice, every photo, every scrap of evidence. That Sunday, her face was on the front page. The headline read, "HOA President Faces Countersuit Over Baseless Legal Attack." There she was, holding her clipboard in a photo from some community event, looking every bit the tyrant she'd become. The phone calls she loved so much, the ones she used to rally troops, to spread rumors, to demand action, stopped coming. Neighbors weren't knocking on her door anymore. They weren't smiling at her across the cul-de-sac. They were whispering behind her back. At the next HOA meeting, Amy went just to see. She told me later that Karen walked in with her usual strut, trying to look untouchable. But instead of admiration, she was met with stares, folded arms, mutters under the breath. Someone finally stood up and asked the question everyone else had been thinking. Why are we spending our dues on this nonsense? Karen tried to spin it, blamed misunderstandings, claimed she was protecting property values, but the room wasn't buying it. By the end of the night, 3 board members had openly called for a vote of no confidence. Karen stormed out before it could be finished, red-faced and shaking. I should have felt triumphant, but Karen wasn't the type to bow out gracefully. If anything, losing her grip only made her more dangerous. The voicemails started soon after, long, venomous tirades on my phone. "You'll regret this. This isn't over. You're destroying this community." Amy listened to one and burst into tears, begging me to make it stop. Then came the night she parked at the end of our driveway, just sat there with her headlights trained on the house. Like a predator watching its prey. I'd never felt so exposed in my own home. That's when I called the sheriff. The deputy came, issued her a formal harassment warning. If she did it again, she'd be facing charges. The look on her face when he handed her that slip of paper, it was the first time I'd ever seen fear break through her mask. From then on, the courtroom felt different. For months, it had been my prison. A place where I sat hunched, waiting to be battered by her accusations. But now, it was my stage. Our lawyer didn't just defend anymore. He attacked. He laid out every sleepless night, every medical note about Amy's stress, every time Karen's car was parked just a little too close to our property. Neighbors even came forward, testifying about how she'd pressured them, how she'd twisted stories, how she'd used her position to intimidate. Each word chipped away at her facade. Karen, the queen of High Pines, started to crumble. Her voice cracked when she spoke. Her lawyer stammered. Even the judge sighed, clearly fed up with her antics. By the 4th month, the tide wasn't just turning, it had turned. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was winning. But victory wasn't free. The bills kept coming, higher than I'd ever imagined. My savings bled dry. My trust in neighbors, even the ones who'd apologized, was still fractured. And every night, when I closed my eyes, I still saw her headlights glowing in the dark. Karen was beaten, cornered, stripped of her crown. But she wasn't gone. And cornered animals don't surrender. They lash out. They bite. And I knew in my gut that her last attack would be the worst yet. I should have known Karen wasn't finished. People like her never walk away quietly. They cling to control with claws and teeth, even when the crown's already slipped from their head. For a few weeks, life almost felt normal again. The countersuit was moving in my favor. Neighbors had stopped glaring and started waving again. Amy was even humming in the kitchen, like the storm was finally passing. I let myself believe it. I let myself think Karen had run out of tricks. Then came the night Amy shook me awake at 2 a.m. "There's someone outside," she whispered, her voice trembling. I grabbed the flashlight and moved to the window. At first, I thought it was just another raccoon rooting through the trash. But then I saw it. The figure, tall and stiff, standing at the edge of the driveway. Just standing, watching. The beam of my flashlight cut across the dark, and the face came into view. Karen. She didn't flinch, didn't turn away, just stood there with that smug half smile, like she wanted me to know I'm still here. I stormed out onto the porch, my voice booming into the night. "Go home, Karen. This is harassment." She didn't answer. She just lifted her phone, snapped a picture of me in my pajamas, and walked back toward her car. By morning, the photo was on the HOA Facebook group with a caption, "Unstable man threatens residents at night." That was her game now, twisting the truth until it strangled me. It only got worse. Letters began showing up in my mailbox, unsigned but unmistakably her work. "We don't want your kind here. Sell before it's too late. Your wife deserves better." Each one more venomous than the last. Amy stopped sleeping. Every creak of the house sent her heart racing. She jumped when the phone rang. She cried over the sink one morning, holding one of those letters in her hands. "She's going to ruin us," she sobbed. "She's going to make this whole town hate us." That's when I realized Karen's final blow wasn't about the courtroom anymore. It was about breaking us from the inside. If she couldn't beat us legally, she'd try to poison every corner of our lives until we couldn't stand it anymore. And she almost did. The turning point came one Saturday afternoon when I came home to find Amy sitting on the porch, pale as a ghost. She was holding another letter, but this one wasn't like the others. This one mentioned our daughter's name, her school, her schedule. That was the line, the final straw. I called the sheriff immediately. My voice shook with rage as I explained. Within the hour, deputies were on my porch. They bagged the letter, took our statements, and told us to stay inside. 2 days later, I got the call I'd been waiting for. "We have enough," the deputy said. "We're filing criminal charges, harassment, stalking, maybe even more, depending on what the DA decides." For the first time, Karen's smirk slipped. She was no longer the untouchable queen of High Pines. She was a criminal suspect, and everyone knew it. Neighbors who once whispered behind our backs now shook their heads in disbelief. "We thought she was just strict," one admitted. "We had no idea it was like this." Others came by with casseroles, apologies, offers to testify. It didn't erase the months of hell, but it was something. The last time I saw Karen before the final hearing, she wasn't in her HOA blazer. She wasn't strutting with her clipboard. She was sitting in the courtroom, shoulders slumped, hair unkempt, eyes darting around like a trapped animal. She looked smaller somehow, weaker. And yet, even then, when the judge read the restraining order against her, when the fines were handed down, when she was formally stripped of her HOA presidency, she turned in her chair and stared straight at me. It wasn't anger this time. It wasn't even hate. It was something colder, a promise. "You may have won this round," her eyes seemed to say, "but I'll never forgive you for it." I walked out of that courtroom with Amy's hand in mine, the paper in my pocket declaring us free of her reach. The war was over, at least on paper. But the scars she left, the sleepless nights, the fear, the constant edge of tension, those would take longer to fade. Even now, I still catch myself glancing out the window at night, half expecting to see her silhouette at the end of the driveway, still pausing when the phone rings, waiting for another venomous voicemail. But I remind myself of the truth. She lost. The Queen of High Pines was dethroned, and we survived. Barely. But we survived. And sometimes, survival is victory enough. When it was finally over, I thought I'd feel nothing but relief. And in a way, I did. No more letters in the mailbox, no more court dates circled in red, no more waking up in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps that weren't really there. But what surprised me most was the quiet. The house felt different, like it was finally breathing again. Amy started sleeping through the night. She laughed more, real laughter, not the nervous kind she used to force. Even the dog seemed calmer, stretched out on the porch as if he too knew the storm had passed. I remember one evening in particular. We were sitting outside, watching the sun dip low behind the trees. Amy handed me a glass of sweet tea and said, "You know, it's funny." She almost broke us, but in the end, she showed us how strong we really are. She was right. Looking back, I realized the fight with Karen wasn't just about an HOA rule or some ridiculous fine. It was about something bigger. About standing up when someone tries to bully you. About not letting a loud voice drown out the truth. Because the truth matters. Even when it's buried under paperwork and threats. Even when the whole neighborhood whispers against you. The truth is steady, patient, and when the time is right, it comes to light. I won't lie, there are scars. I still catch myself double-checking the locks at night. Still feel my stomach knot when I see an envelope with no return address. But I also know this: Karen didn't win, and she never will. Sometimes victory doesn't look like fireworks or parades. Sometimes it's just a quiet evening on the porch, holding your wife's hand, knowing you protected your home, your family, your peace. And if there's one thing I learned from all this, it's that people like Karen thrive on fear. They want you rattled. They want you to bend, to cave, to give up. But if you stand firm, if you hold your ground long enough, eventually they stumble. And when they do, the fall is theirs to bear. So now when neighbors ask me about it, I just smile and say, "We made it through." Because that's the truth. We survived the storm. And sometimes, survival is the sweetest victory of all.